and artists of all levels have the chance to meet, engage, and promote new collaborative projects. On behalf of the gallery and myself, I'd like to thank you all for tuning into today's Artist Talk. We're thrilled to be joined by Debra Pearlman and curator Ellen Hankel-Fagan, who will be discussing their current exhibition at the gallery, as Ellen mentioned, A Kind of Language, which showcases a series of Debra's previously unexhibited photographic prints. And just to let everyone know, there will be a Q&A at the end of the discussion, so please feel free throughout, if you're inspired, enter any questions you have in the chat, and I'll pull some for the end. Thank you again for coming, and I'll pass the baton off to Ellen.
Hi, I'm still admitting people. I'm Ellen Hankel-Fagan of Odetta Gallery, and it's a real pleasure to be able to bring Odetta's programming as a guest to Project Art Space, which is at 99 Madison Avenue at the intersection of 29th Street and Madison Avenue. At the end of our presentation, there is a link where you can make an appointment to come and see the exhibition in real life if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you so much for coming both to the gallery space and to our conversation. If you are not muted, please go ahead and mute yourself, and we'll be opening it up for Q&A at the end of our discussion. A few more people coming in. So with A Kind of Language, this is the second opportunity I've had to show Debra Pearlman's work. And I was fascinated with the amount of references that flood into my mind when I see her images, connections to art history, to psychology, to the conundrum of the adult trapped in the child and the child trapped in the adult. All of it, for me, gives me a great sense of Debra's humor, her dry wit as she observes the world around her, and her knowledge of art history, which is deep. And I just so have enjoyed working with Debra. And I'm going to move into a screen share now. I think we have pretty much everyone in the room. Well, actually, before I move into the screen share, I wanted to propose a toast. And if you have your cup of coffee, or you have your mimosa, or you have your beverage of choice, I'd like to raise a glass now. Oh, here comes another person. I needed another pair of hands, sorry. I'd like to raise a toast to artists and galleries everywhere. We've had such a challenging year, and it's been heroic what everyone has done to stay current in their studio, collaborative, and to continue to feed their need to express themselves and make it seen. So cheers to all of you, to all of us. May we persevere into 2021. And I just wanted to thank you all for being as persistent and brave as you are. Cheers. Thank you. There's a few more people coming in. Those of you that come into the waiting or from the waiting room, please mute yourselves. And now I'm going to move on to the shared screen. And just give me a thumbs up if you can see the shared screen now of the opening of the show. Wonderful. Okay. A little bit of information about Odetta. If you don't know the gallery, I think most of you do, and thank you for that support. Odetta was opened in 2014 in Bushwick. My needs as an artist to curate exhibitions stems from being the sixth child in a family of 8 children. The conversations swirled around the dinner table, and to be heard, you had to get your timing down and get your punchline in just in time, or you would never be heard. So that idea of a shared conversation that happens all around us, I believe is why I'm a curator. I want to know what you're thinking about when I present an idea, and I want to know what other artists are working on that are related to my ideas so that the conversation is robust. And since opening Odetta, it's been just a wonderful deep dive into curation. I've put together over 70 exhibitions now between Odetta Galleries spaces and virtual space and shared spaces or pop-up spaces. So I have met a ton of artists and am constantly conjuring up ways to pair artists with one another to tell deeper stories about contemporary issues and formal issues in fine art. So I wanted to welcome Debra Pearlman and a little bit about Project Art Space. They invited me to bring an exhibition to their space back a year ago. It was exactly a year ago. And when I went, I immediately thought that Debra's work would be a perfect fit at this scale, in this space. We would be able to have a comprehensive view of her large scale digital prints. And miraculously, again, Project Art Space stayed on calendar through all of the lockdowns. Here I am on time. Thank you again to Alex and to Michael Yee for believing in us. And thank you, Debra, for crossing the fear threshold of COVID pandemic and social distancing to bring the work into the space. We are able to have you see the show in real life until February 26th. The exhibition has been extended. So Debra, I wanted to welcome you, and I'm going to hand the mic off to you now.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you everyone for showing up with breakfast and or past, and Ellen and Alex, Project Art Space. This has been a lovely exchange, and it is the first time that I've been invited to show large scale photographic archival prints. So it's been a different way also for me to step back and see my work, and happily to see this range of time that took me by surprise, actually, from a very early piece to literally the last sequence, which were just about to get printed before we got locked down, and being able to get that done to complete the show, mask and all. So I appreciate that experience to be able to have a kind of overview. You know, certainly much came in between, but as anyone knows who's had this good experience of being able to show their work outside their own space, there's always some perspective that happens, and more exchange and more ways of thinking about it, and a little bit different awareness, seeing things fresh in a new way. So for that, I thank you again. It's been very rich. One of the things that came up in our conversation with Ellen during this period was she has commented on my humor, which has not always been the case. It's not something that I've been that aware of all the time, but the first work, which we'll see in a moment in the show, was one that really popped up during our conversation and became literally the first work that you see when you enter the show, Yellow Dress. It was something I was looking at once we started this discussion about the show, and it made me laugh out loud. So I knew that would be the case for Ellen. So that was a nice thing to know, that kind of conversation. I can tell you that Halloween is my Christmas. It is a great time to be out and photograph. And I have been doing this well over a decade. And so what you're seeing is a selection of these kinds of moments that really have struck me and resonate and continue to generate more generations of work in different kinds of iterations, whether from photograph or process painting, objects, three-dimensional objects, relief objects. They have multiple lives. So when I preface by saying that this is the first time that I've been able to see my photographic work, I mean that in the context of a much larger body of work that crosses media and materials. So this has been a nice way to see those threads.
So with Yellow Dress, what struck me is this primary figure in yellow. I've dubbed her L'Infanta. I believe she popped right out of Velázquez's wonderful painting and ended up in all kinds of mass culture, which trickled down to Disney, Beauty and the Beast, and ultimately Walmart, where the Halloween costume was made available. And this access to regal trappings on a figure just cracks me up. I never had daughters. I only had sons, so I never got to have a girl dress up as a princess, but she seems to fit the role exactly. And it's timeless for me.
Very nice. One of the titles in my head for this was Queen Bee, because that's so much a part of this interaction about who's in control. And though she's not leading the pack, and the bee costume is the leader, the way that this has been framed. And I say that because what you don't see for me is a decision very clearly made, as well as what I choose to allow you to see from my experience. But I prefer to just leave it neutral and just, it's a way that I remember the image and identify it, and it just leaves more ambiguity about what's going on. And this picture will actually continue the thread at the end of our walkthrough virtual exhibition, because there was more information that kept resonating for me. And so for this work, more work came from it, which in this case was photographic, which will come close to concluding our tour.
This is a view of the gallery walls as you enter the main space with Yellow Dress on the left. The second work is Two Hands.
I should begin by telling you that it's 62 inches tall, which at this point is larger than I am, for whatever that's worth. So it's an experience to be in front of it. The pigment is very, very dense, and it reads almost like textured like fabric in person. And though I'm grateful that work, especially photographic work, tends to have a more honest life online, unlike very textured, heavily worked imagery, you still don't have the same experience. You do have its graphic quality, its proportion, all of those important elements that make a work, but the surface, the experience of being in something that you're engulfed in, that can't be reproduced. So I wanted to first state the scale, because that was very much a part of it. I can also say that this is one of the later works in the show, and it is the only work that's a composite, which by that I mean, I chose to add the hands as another iteration of this figure, which also exists as the original print, chromogenetic print, as well as an archival digital print and pigment print of the figure in its natural space. So, and that that happened because I was looking at it from a different orientation, and that's what it suggested to me. It suggested a different kind of movement, a different kind of fluidity, and I just made the decision I need to see this with a hand or maybe two hands, and then that became yet another kind of experience with this image.
As we move through the space, we see carousel, which this digital archival pigment print is also very large scale. In Debra's studio view, you can see the original piece that I was considering for a former exhibition, Turner's Patent Yellow. And as I was looking at the painting, Debra decided to show me the source material, which she had taken a plunge and decided to try to print it at a monumental scale. And I was bowled over. And it just so happened that the carousel horse was more yellow in the print than it was in the painting, which gave me full permission to use it in Turner's Patent Yellow. And is a key, it was a featured work in Turner's Patent Yellow, and it is still something that just calls out to me, but I'm gonna let Debra talk to you about her images and associations, and then we'll expound. I do wanna say that if you have questions or comments, please put them into the chat.
Well, Ellen's right. This is an important work for me, and it's one of the earlier photographs. And we discussed having the painting here because, in this instance, the painting came first. At that point, as you use the word source material, which is true, it became my vocabulary to develop in other kinds of ways. And the painting is quite graphic. I mean, the color is very limited. The yellow in the painting is an underpainting, which precedes the whole surface with the addition of the glass beads, which change as you move among the work physically. The yellow wasn't a formula. It was kind of just an approximation of where I wanted it to fall so that I could be surprised as well. I mean, if I'm not surprised and something isn't drawing me, it's like, you know, why do it? So that's how it's very different in terms of marking those vertical elements versus the photograph, which is so much about that saturated color. They're very different kinds of experiences. And one of the things, not only about its iconic quality, the fact that I've absolutely chosen this moment where she's having this internal experience. It wasn't about what she looked like. It was about this moment, this internal experience, public space that I happened to see. The ambiguity going on around the figure, with the figure, is obvious to me, and it's something that I welcome. I think the more kinds of responses we have to a work, the more variability, gives it a kind of richness that makes it something more than an illustration doing a job to explain one thing. And for me, that's very important. What we bring to a work of art is
I think we might have lost our artist.
Debra, you need to come closer to the computer, I believe. The pleasures of Zoom.
there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
So
now we lost you for quite a moment there. I think you should come a little closer to the computer.
Sure.
Yeah, that's better. Sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, naturally, it's going to happen today.
Yeah,
There's
we're
going to be
gonna
a problem. What can you do? So I just want to address the fact that, it's a very immediate moment that I see and respond to. There are no words in between. It's a very, very quick, spontaneous reaction. Somehow, we carry so many images in our brain and so many experiences. Something within those, it's being triggered by seeing this image. And it's a very iconic image that one knows, but not necessarily with the words to describe it. It's just, it when you see it. That information becomes more clarified after after you experience seeing it in physical space, after that immediacy of, yeah, that's it. That was one of the questions that's come up in the last few days, how that happens. You get lucky sometimes, just being out.
I think right before the studio visit, I saw one of those movies about Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, and then I saw this print. And the fact that she seems to be in ecstasy and has this belt around her, I just immediately went and built those associations. And it just, again, made me laugh that this just occurred spontaneously in the child. And when I showed it at Odetta in Harlem, this large scale print was at the bottom of the steps as you entered into the gallery. It was all you saw. And the common phrase was, oh my goodness, the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, just universally. And had it not been for that belt, I don't know that I could have wanted to take that leap. It would have been nagging at me, but the belt just immediately nailed it down for me.
Yeah, it's there, but it's not pronounced, which works for me. And it's a material that I also use in my work physically, whether they're part of a constructed painting, creating a darker contrast and texture. So that association was interesting for me to think about. It's something I hadn't. They've been more of a separate kind of experience, but yeah, there it is. That's part of the content. This containment and also freedom, how they play off each other. So. And
also just the rich vocabulary of color in historical paintings is something that occurred spontaneously or not. Debra, you chose the decisive moment, but it certainly is here, and we could unpack it piece by piece in those terms as well. Did you want to mention something about the horse?
It was interesting to me. Irving Sandler, this is one of the many things that he came to see, and he very kindly wanted me to meet Jay Relentis. So this is a bit of time now, and because the photograph was taken in Dumbo, and he thought that would be interesting, and it was. We had an absolutely fabulous conversation, and she let me know that this horse seems to be the most favorite horse, which for whatever reasons I like knowing. And then later I learned it was also her favorite horse, and photo shoots have been done here. Makes me curious to go back and look again by comparison of the others, why this is chosen. Maybe part of the fairy tale of, the white horse dashing away. I don't know, but I just like knowing that history. And the primacy of those colors, they reflect primary colors and the content, but they're off. It's not blue, it's aqua. It's not yellow, it's kind of cream. And the red is a very particular kind of red. So it kind of refers to that primacy, but also being off kilter, which I like.
And now this is another vertical, Cuba 1.
Mm-hmm. This work was the one that I made the decision to get rid of all of the background information. I felt that the form was so strong as a visual element. I didn't want any noise or distraction. And I really felt the need to make this very large and vertical. So like the two-hand piece, this is also 62 inches. It's large. It fills the length of a wall like a tree or a very tall person, or not so tall, I suppose, from another perspective. Getting rid of all that information allowed us to really pay more attention to the subtlety of these images. What's in her hand on the left mirroring the arm on the right. The amount of space I felt was needed proportionally to give this figure space to move, to fall, to flow, whatever was going on, and just get rid of that extraneous stuff that would counter it. The original photograph, actually, she's on a old stone path. I mean, the whole road is covered with stone. So it's this very rich texture, which was lovely, but it didn't work with what I felt this image required. So off it went.
And completing the main gallery space is Two Marys.
Yes. I will admit that this work, when I saw that auburn, red, brown, flowing hair, I did also think Mary Magdalene. It's from years and years of looking at medieval art, looking at art. It's the way that the curls and waves flow, the way they would be carved out of stone. It did that, as well as this, again, this incredible moment of internal play that it's just oblivious to anything going on around it. It's public within a private space, and very, endearing and full of many, many emotions and meaning and possibilities. So I say that because I started off by saying I don't necessarily see what it is the association is. I just know, but this time it was, really, really hit. And also this work has been going on now for some time. The other thing that happened with this work is that I became so curious about that particular area of the picture with her flowing hair, with the hand. Underneath, there's this heart on her shirt, which is partially visible. And again, the idea of framing. How much information do I want to include so that this work has become another source of more generations of work. It became the source for my beginning these very small 4-inch by 4-inch photographs. Something very intimate that just became a curiosity of mine of how to further see more information. So the figure that's horizontal has also been used in other works as well, honoring parts of that. And again, the texture of that uniform grass, the tones within it, for me, it functioned as a kind of framing in the same way the blackness did in the large vertical pieces. So.
And again, from a distance, as a curator, an artist will oftentimes send you a few options. Maybe you want to think about this, maybe you want to think about that. So the thumbnail that I saw of Two Marys, I immediately zoomed in on the blue of the character grieving over the white prostrate figure, and just again erupted into laughter. Like, how did she get that? That is just brilliant. And as I've enjoyed looking at this image many times now, it also brings up the idea of play and the idea of playing dead, and how this notion of playing dead, this behavior occurs in the animal kingdom as well as in humans. And here we see it played out in children. very unaware of an observer.
I mean, all of these images are street pictures. You know, I see them outside, and you know, many photographers choose to set up their photographs and stage, and that's another way of working. One isn't better than the other, it's just different. And for me, the fact that I just happen to see these, I mean, it's an incredible chance. And I'm grateful when I've had this. And I also understand that it's the luck of the draw sometimes, and just, you see it, you know it, you do it. You have to be ready. So I just wanted to say that this really did happen outside. I really did see it. Nothing was touched, so. Yeah.
We're forever grateful.
Thank you.
This is the far view of the main gallery space. I wanted to use the verticals as a punctuation. Oftentimes, I consider the walls a blank page where there might be some type of annotation of music transcribed. So the verticals serve in that way to offer contrast and form. And then we leave the main gallery space and we're headed into this hallway, and we're able to see the yellow dress sequence.
So I referred to these earlier, that these are the most recent work in the show, printed this year during the lockdown. And what happened is that I mean, the work starts to resonate. Other kinds of information I feel need to be looked at. I want to pay attention to it. There's more material there to work with. And it just nags at me until I have to see it physically. So these, this interaction between the two, this exchange, was really interesting to me, and this diagonal going into the space. And also the hand behind the figures really matters. And I became very aware of that. And not only is the adult hand standing in for that larger, taller adult world, but there's an ambiguity to that gesture and references to that gesture, and it doesn't hurt that she's got angel wings. And that arm is a visual echo to her magic wand, which actually is kind of drooping. And certainly, given the year that we're had and are having, I couldn't help but think, how wouldn't that be nice if we all had a magic wand? And it worked, but this is the best we can do. So this kind of duality, this play off, you know, left to right, foreground, kind of background, but not, she's coming forward. You know, this kind of emotional social dance that goes on in this little world of small people plays out all kinds of ways in life. And I don't think any of us want to revisit the kinds of childish, you know, tantrums we've been experiencing these last years. But how these things get negotiated, who's tough, who's there for the long run. I mean, those things, they come at you the more that you live with these, but in terms of that moment, it's the moment. And this one for me, though there is a sequence, they can interchange, but I also like the idea of these adult hands off in the background, sort of leaving us as this is the final work in the exhibition. It's kind of, you know, there they go off into the world. There I go. Thanks for coming. Bye, folks. I mean, all these ways that, you know, pre-medieval time, our hands, and as I'm sitting here, I can't help but use my hands to accentuate my speech. You know, I could sit on them like maybe some people do, but we all do this. And why? Because our world is visual language, it's physical language. And that's really what this has all been about for me. And that's been the kind of working title. And though I certainly don't deny all of the associations and mirrors of this imagery, primarily it's that form, what I see in that moment and what might be communicated, what it might mean, and how it functions visually as a detail, as a marker, as a form of information. Whether it's done with color or form, they're all acting as ways to enunciate and focus.
When you come off the elevator, you'll be greeted by a large scale image called Hey.
This is an early photograph, and it was printed large immediately. That's what it needed to be. And I was particularly interested in the idea of seeing this large space of texture, of nature, that certainly right now we're even more particularly starved for. It's first and foremost this texture of rich subtleties of color. And then we see the figure off to the side. I'm interested in that idea of partial viewing, of hidden, what's seen, what's not seen, whether they're in shadow or side view, back view. And some of you may or may not have noticed that there are these extra pair of feet dangling from the branch. And if really, it takes a little bit of looking to see that area above those dangling legs is actually darker band of the leaves because of that figure hidden. I like that. I like that everything isn't there immediately, that it takes some time. And hopefully one is rewarded spending some time with that work to get more information, more that's uncovered. That's what you hope happens, that it's not just, oh yeah, I see it, I got it, I'm done. But that more can unfold with time, with careful looking. What more could you ask for?
Thank you so much, Debra. Alex, I'm going to stop the screen share and we'll open it up to questions. So bear with me, everybody.
Yeah, please. If anyone has any additional questions they'd like to ask of Ellen or Debra, please, again, feel free to type them into the chat. I'll read them out. Before we do, though, I want to just thank everyone again for tuning in on this chilly January. I guess we're still in the morning. And of course, thank you to Debra and Ellen for fostering such a lovely conversation about Debra's work and the show. Ellen mentioned it previously, but the exhibition has been extended through to the end of February. Friday, February 26th is the last day you can catch it. We're open by appointment only, COVID, of course, Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., but you can follow links on the website or our Instagram or social media if you want to schedule a visit. I also wanted to mention that you can see more of Debra's work in an exhibition that closes today, actually, called Suffrage Now at the Elizabeth Ney Museum in Austin, Texas. It's a group show of contemporary female photographers whose works comment on the centennial anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. In case you're interested and want to see more. I have some questions for you, Debra.
Okay.
You mentioned that Halloween is like your Christmas. I suppose it's because unprompted, hundreds of people are running out dressed very unusually and give you tons of opportunities to capture these sort of street processions. And given the subject matter of your photographs, where you're capturing people in candid spaces, are there situations? Are there alternative situations that sort of prompt you to race out and snap photos? Or are you just constantly head on a swivel looking for things? There's of course an undeniable chance element in what you're doing, but I was curious if you had sort of routines or conditions that you try to foster to optimize your practice.
Well, certainly the end of the day light makes everything glisten, and it's after a day in the studio, it's for me, it's a very wonderful balance. I don't want to lose the making time. It all works together.
Sure.
So it's a balance. there are times going to large gardens or just wandering the streets, you just see, you see things. And it's not that there's any formula, but just that experience is certainly one. Sometimes it's just too crowded and I just I can't see individual information. And sometimes after coming back and looking at what I shot, I can see better what I was looking at among all the noise and all the physical bodies. Certainly the costumes help because the adults, the pets, everybody's dressed up. Their guard is relaxed, and
Right.
you're seeing, gender. You're seeing hopes, dreams, fantasies, role models. You're just seeing all this stuff that over the years now is getting to be almost predictable. So when I see characters out of the expected dress up, I'm delighted. Oh, good. She's a firewoman. Finally, it sort of makes you hopeful of the potential out there for a wider range of seeing.
No, I can understand how costumes would sort of heighten the dramatization of the subject matter, right? Of course, everyone's decked out, royal or otherwise. Debra, I wanted to ask you about Two Hands. You mentioned it's one of the latest works in the show, the more recent, but it's also the only composite work.
Right.
Are you planning on pursuing any more, not necessarily collage, but more complicated photographic compilations in the future?
That's a good question. And I don't mean to not answer directly, but it just depends on the image.
Putting you on the spot.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I set out to do something. It's that what I see suggests something. So the Cuba is the long vertical. That's what was needed. And that's what the two hand, I mean, that image exists elsewhere, but it's just what it suggested to me and being driven to want to see it physically. So maybe, probably, possibly. It depends what happens in the moment of looking and making that connection. It's all pretty intuitive, I think is what I'm saying. And although I did at least make the choice of they're 23 inches wide. Let's not make, let's just like create some rule here. This is what they need. And then the figure is adjusted and the height is pretty consistent. But that grew out of what the individual works seemed to need in terms of their space in which to live.
Gotcha. We have a question from Sarah, who is curious. One, she compliments your sublime imagery, but Sarah wanted to know how many photos does it take to get ones you're confident in that you want to put up in an exhibition? Is it 100? Is it 1,000? What did we? How much is left on that?
I can't answer that. I just see it and I know it, and I don't waste a lot of time with other stuff. However, referring to these crowded scenes, sometimes going back, it's me having a better magnifying glass of realizing there's this strange thing going on in the background that I'm curious about. So something comes out of what you don't expect. There isn't a lot of throwaway. It's not a minor white kind of thing where you only allow yourself to take 2 pictures, but it's just when I'm interested, I react. And if I don't, I don't. That's the best I can say.
It has been fun in my learning more about your work. how much of the photos you're willing to rework and reincorporate in other formats, isolating, say, like specific facial features or expressions, and sort of drawing the eye to them and emphasizing them when they determine. Do you happen to have any works on hand that you could show us that I'm just curious. I forget how much is still up in your studio.
Oh, well, there's never enough room for all this, but I think you wanted to ask me about this one, which didn't end up in a show. And we actually used it for a virtual holiday card. She was actually in a larger format photograph. She's in a shirt that says "wonderful," which I found hilarious, having a complete meltdown. And I just, so I guess that answers your question for a little bit. I've been working more with the fragments of some of the photographs, so that they're living in small objects. They're framed as relief wall works, as well as small photograph. As I mentioned with Two Marys, taking that head. So I don't know if you can see this in the screen, but so there's a whole sequence now of these 4-inch prints that just pulling out that information. And I made these because I started realizing that there are more of these over time, where the head is moving away, the eyes are closed. In a previous exhibition, there's a photograph, her head is back in pleasure, but she's in a playground, so she's behind bars. And I thought, oh, well, that connects with Carousel. I didn't, and I wouldn't have had that experience had I not been able to put those together in an exhibition and just see them fresh. Because we all have so much work, there's a lot there to go through or just call up, but sometimes it just happens immediately. Yeah. That's not a lot, I mean, but that gives you a little taste of changes of scale depending on materials at hand. And as I'm thinking about that question, it really has reminded me, this lockdown, of pretty much my entire life. I mean, from my earliest studio as a child and working with whatever was around, making these collages in 2- and 3-dimensional form, using literally anything, combining words, texture. Texture is really important. Yeah. And so I've been doing that in this last year. A broken lock set became a great, this brass frame for a small work that's mounted. So I guess it's how we just function. This is what's happening. What can I do? What can I grab? What am I responding to? This works. And it's part of the richness and spontaneity of being out in the street, and it's like, wow, I'm really seeing this. Wow, this is real.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Exciting to hear as an audience member.
Question. Yeah.
Maybe one more.
Absent any more in the chat?
Maybe one more.
Let's see what we have. A lot of compliments, Deborah.
Well,
a lot of compliments.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I mean, it's the most amount of heads I've seen in once in over a year. Thank you. Yeah, and it's early.
We'll give you the full audience here, Deborah. Can you see this?
I see just a few across the top, and maybe it's been nice not to be distracted, but I would love to say hello. And thank you again for getting out of bed in the morning and joining us. This would have been really fun to do in person. I mean, all those years of being in a museum giving talks, it'd be so nice to do it in person. But this is pretty great, and I really appreciated the effort here and the support. So thank you all. Really nice experience.
Thank you all.
Pleasure again.
Thank you. Really appreciate you coming, and we're in for a nice winter storm. So if your studio is nearby, I'm anticipating you'll be in your studio riding out the storm. Okay, I think we're going to end the meeting, so I'm going to stop recording.